Dear devotees, please accept my humble obeisances. So, Umagyanatimanasya jana Chakshurunmitam yena tasmat Sri Guru Namaste Saraswati. So, we are continuing the book Namacharya, the life of Sri Haridasa Thakur by Rupa Vilasadas. So far, we have completed up to page 24. There is a conversation going on between Haridasa Thakur and the prostitute. So, starting from page 25, the night ended, but by Haridasa Thakura's association, the mind of the prostitute had changed. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura comments, watching the manifestation of the supernatural force of the character of Haridasa, the heart of the sinful woman was changed. The transformation of the prostitute was profound. It is described in the Chaitanya Shikshamrita by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura that the association of a Madhyama Adhikari is sufficient to create Shraddha or faith. However, by association with an Uttama Adhikari, symptoms of bhava ecstasy may be experienced. Although the prostitute is described in the text and commentary above in very severe terms, sinful, fallen, etc., in the modern age, young men and women indulge in random acts of sex, gambling, intoxication, etc. As a matter of course, without the promise of reward and with very little thought of the possible consequences. Therefore, their minds and hearts are very covered and dull, even when compared to the young prostitutes. Srila Prabhupada rescued many such men and women who were indulging in behavior much worse than the young woman sent by Khan. And yet, Srila Prabhupada was able, by the supernatural force of his character, to give them a taste of spiritual ecstasy and set them on the path of liberation and pure devotional service. By experiencing the higher taste of Krishna consciousness, layers of ignorance are shattered and real life begins. The young girl who had been born into a culture of respect for saintly persons was deeply affected by the powerful atmosphere of divine love which emanated from Srila Haridasa Thakur. Now purified, she fell at the feet of Haridasa Thakura and confessed that Ramachandra Khan had sent her to tempt him for sex. The young girl, terrified at the temerity of what she had done, began to plead with Haridasa that she wanted shelter. She felt that she had committed many sins, topped off by this attempt to cause his saint to break his vows. She begged for deliverance. Srila Haridasa Thakura replied, I know everything about the conspiracy of Ramachandra Khan. He is nothing but an ignorant fool. Therefore, his activities do not make me feel unhappy. On the very day Ramachandra Khan was planning his intrigue against me, I would have left this place immediately. But because you have come to me, I stayed here for 3 days to deliver you. The prostitute said, kindly act as my spiritual master, instruct me in my duty by which to get relief from material existence. The Thakura replied, immediately go home and distribute to the Brahmanas whatever properly you have. Then come back to this room and stay here forever in Krishna consciousness. Chant the Hare Krishna mantra continuously and render service to the Tulsi plant by watering her and offering prayers to her. In this way, you will very soon get the opportunity to be sheltered at the lotus feet of Krishna. Haridasa Thakura knew by the inner direction of the Lord in the heart exactly what Ramachandra Khan had planned, but he had stayed just for the chance of rescuing the young girl who was at her heart's core innocent. The proof of her sincerity will shortly be revealed. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura comments, the, the heart of the merciful Haridasa was touched. He forget all about the bad profession of the harlot, the unworthy object of the lust of many, and deciding that she was eligible for taking the Maha Mantra of the name of Hari in the manner that is free from offense, rescued her from the deep well of sensuality. Such mercy is not met with anywhere except in the heart of Vaishnava. All praise to Haridasa. May your mercy be appreciated by all the people of the world. In his commentary on this incident, Professor Sanyal raises the issue of whether the conversation of the prostitute was simply an exercise in blind sentimentality on her part. This concept of religious sentimentalism has its parallel in other religious traditions where, in the intense atmosphere of the revival of faith, one dedicates himself with great fervor to be born again or to transform his or her life. After a few days, the idea is given up and the former life of sense and indulgence is renewed. In Sanskrit, the expression smasana vairagya, crematorium renunciation, is used to illustrate a similar principle. One goes to the burning god reflects on the temporality of human existence. He or she decides to be dedicated to spirituality more seriously. After a few weeks, the initial enthusiasm dissipates and the inspiration is lost. The professor rejects this idea that her renunciation was sentimental, explaining the harlot was not converted by speculative arguments, the address addressed to the mind, but simply by listening to the name of Hari from the lips of Thakura Haridasa and chanting the same herself in his company. She had apparently the advantage of possessing at the very outset a natural regard for Thakur Haridas and for his advice and also for the holy Tulsi. This was the only antecedent condition of her redemption. Was it therefore blind and traditional faith that actually saved her in this crisis? The answer must be in the negative. Those who are most officially officiously given to the cult of blind faith are not necessarily attracted towards the natural devotee. The affinity for the true soul is itself a spiritual, that is to say, perfectly self conscious impulse. It must be most carefully distinguished from the blind material impulse, which is so common and which, as a matter of fact, is the worst form of obstacle in the way of the realization of spiritual life. The instinctive affinity of the harlot for Haridasa is an activity of the soul and as such is therefore perfectly moral, perfectly self-cognizant and categorically different from senses sentimentality that ordinarily passes in this world as blind faith. Faith is the instinctive attitude of the soul towards the truth and can therefore never be blind. It is the blind who in their blindness confound true faith with the counterfeit where with which alone they happen to be, unfortunately for themselves only too familiar. Real faith can alone lead one to the presence of a pure soul. The material mind cannot reach the proximity of a sadhu. The harlot possessed the spiritual faculty. It was possible for her to really approach Thakur Haridas. Regarding Haridas' instruction to the former prostitute to distribute all of her possessions to qualified brahmanas and taken up his example of chanting and worshipping Tulasi, Srila Prabhupada comments, everything actually belongs to Krishna, but so-called civilized men unfortunately think that everything belongs to them. This is a mistake of materialistic civilization. The prostitute, Vesya, has earned money by questionable means, and therefore Haridasa Thakur advised her to distribute to the Brahmanas whatever she possessed. So, more two paragraphs. Prabhu. The order given by Haridasa for a young woman to take up a life of such severe renunciation and self abnegation might strike many readers as impractical or impossible to follow. However, he had bestowed such a powerful mercy upon her that she was able to fully surrender to his instructions. Krishna promises in the Bhagavad Gita that whoever fully surrenders to him will be protected from the result of all sinful reactions and attain the platform of fearlessness. Due to being completely protected at every moment by Krishna, the former prostitute had complete faith in this principle and Krishna's pure representative Haridasa Thakura. Thank you, Prabhu. I will summarize you. So we have continuing the discussion. The conversation between uh, prostitute and Haridasa. So we know that Ramachandra consent the prostitute to disturb Haridasa Thakur, but Haridasa Thakur has full faith in Lord Krishna. He did not disturb her, and he changed the prostitute into a devotee. So here in the Chaitanya Sikshamrita by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura says that when we associate even with Madhyama Adhikari, that is sufficient to create Shraddha, faith. However, by associating with Uttama Adhikari, pure devotee, we will get Bhava, experience. But when coming to uh, this thing, even the Madhyama faith, Madhyama Adhikari is sufficient to give the faith. Although at that time, Haridas Thakur is a pure devotee, he was chanting and he was doing, but he converted the prostitute into a pure devotee. So in the modern time, we all know Prabhupada, Maharaj, author Rupa Vilas Das, wrote here very clearly that modern civilization is so tough, so difficult that everybody is indulging without any uh, proper relationships and everything, and that's the reason the whole world is disturbing. But here, Prabhupada also says in one of the para that when we have the supernatural force towards the spiritual ecstasy, that gives the path of pure liberation and pure. So that's one thing. And next thing, uh, uh, she felt at the feet. She realized that Haridas Thakur replied everything. She made her to change her heart, and now she fell at the feet of the Haridas Thakur and confessed that Ramachandra Khan had sent her to attempt to tempt him for sex. So she came up, she surrendered, and she said the truth. Then Haridas Thakur did not said anything. He directly said, he said very simply that immediately go home and distribute to the Brahmanas whatever property you have. Then come back to this room and stay here forever in Krishna consciousness. Chant the Hare Krishna mantra continuously and render service to the Tulsi plant. And then slowly you will be advanced. Very simply, Haridas Thakur replied and gave the inner direction of the Lord in the heart exactly. Next, for some after that, there was a commentary going on, and the Professor Sanyal raises the issue of whether the conversation of the prostitute was simply an exercise in blind sentimentality of her plant of on her part. So in that scenario, in Sanskrit, there is an expression called smasana vairagya, crematorium renunciation, that is used to illustrate a similar type of principles to to test, maybe to test faith or to test uh, some idea. So here, after few weeks, whatever the enthusiasm he got, the initial enthusiasm dissipates and the inspiration is lost. The professor rejects this idea that her renunciation was sentimental explaining, because people are thinking that everything is mine. They don't have the faith in the God. That's the reason when there is shortcomings or upcoming small up and downs, though they won't continue in this journey. That is another drawback. But whatever may be the situation, we need to continue the journey. Then only the faith increases more and more and more. So real faith can alone lead one to the presence of a pure soul. The material mind cannot reach the proximity of a sadhu. The harlot possessed the spiritual faculty by which it was possible for her to really approach Thakur Haridas. And next, Prabhupada said that everything actually comments in addition to that, because Haridas Thakur said that whatever you have, please distribute it and come back here and chant Hare Krishna. Because everything actually belongs to Krishna, but so-called civilized men think that everything belongs to them. That's the reason they are unable to surrender to God. When we have faith that everything is emanating from Krishna, so that is the way the faith uh, develops or initiates. In that way, finally, as a conclusion part, Krishna promises in the Bhagavad Gita that whoever fully surrendered to him will be protected from the results of all sinful reactions and attains the platform of fearlessness. And in that scenario, Haridas Thakur is a very best example. Why? Because a prostitute came to her to disturb her, but he changed the prostitute into a devotee. And because Haridas Thakur never lose the faith, he have full 100% like full 100% faith on Krishna. So thank you so much, devotee.